in there. Is this a pointer? Oh, I could move around. Here we are in the middle. So this is humans by weight, and then goats, pigs, cattle, sheep, horses, other mammals that are here because we're here, basically, in these light colours. So each of these blocks is 1 million tonnes. So we've got one few blocks of elephants and a few other wild animals kind of dotted around the place. I think this just makes, in a visual sense, the very broad and important point of just how much of an impact we're having on the planet. So I think it was David Lister who first said that human beings were like a disease spreading around the planet, which probably taking it a little bit too far, but there we go. Okay, so now on to more specifically the IPCC special report on climate change and land. And these next few slides actually are from Cynthia Rosenzweig, who was one of the co-leads along with Tim Benton on chapter 5 of the report. So I'm going to assume you kind of all know what the IPCC is and the working groups and the fact that they've got to this point of having a special report, which I think has been really powerful and unique in the combination of different disciplines and the targeting of that towards that sort of nexus of land and how we manage land and food and a whole bunch of associated issues. So I'm slightly biased. I'm at the food side of things and sort of have been for sort of 20 years looking at climate change impacts on food. So I'm going to give a food system angle, if you like, on that. So the food system involves many different systems. The climate system on the top. So the screen's quite small, isn't it? Especially for people at the back. And you've got screens as well in between, I see, which is good. So we've got under the climate system at the top, which has impacts on the food system. So for many years, there was a lot of research on just that one arrow, and there still is, between climate system and impacts. And I did many years of research on that. But actually now the environment we're in is where all of these things really need to be and are. We recognise how joined up all of these different areas are. So we have the broader food system, which encompasses crop, animal, fish, seafood production, processing, value chains, markets, trade, demand, consumption, diets, loss and waste. There's a whole food system which its own outcomes on food security. We'll talk more about that later. Obviously interacting also with ecosystems. And then there's a whole socio-economic system of demography, economics, food, environment, consumer behaviour, a whole bunch of things. And you can see sort of in the report, this is quite a nice summary slide of that, but it's wanted to just give you a sense of the scope of the report. This is just with a food system angle, because that's my bias, right? You can take different angles. There are so many different aspects of land and climate change and the interactions in the report that it's really quite remarkable to have brought those things together in the way that the report has. Maybe I don't need to labour the food. Well, I'll go on. I will say a little bit more. These are some of the high level sort of conclusions that have come out of the on the food system. So risk of food system instability is very high. Integrated supply and demand side options can be scaled up in all segments of the food system. So this is the idea of how we manage the food system and the broader idea in the report. How do we manage land in order to be sustainable, to feed, to get all of the things we want out of land in the context of a growing population and all of the politics and the interactions and everything else that goes on. Dietary changes are you'll see that in Tim Benton's talk, are provide a really big and significant opportunity, almost a no-brainer, I would say. Okay, so in terms of my thoughts on the session today and the kind of things I've asked the speakers to comment on, I think the fact that I think the report has the potential to have really full spectrum policy implications. The diets, as you can imagine, that's right down to sort of hashtag veganism and people saying, okay, this is a great idea now, this is good for me, it's good for the planet, and that right through to the high level policy. And I hope that's something that comes out today and in the panel discussion especially. What are the actionable pieces of information here? And I'll be challenging the panelists and perhaps the speakers as well to sort of say, what are the big advances and the really actionable information that we have out of that. Another thing I have in the back of my mind for this session is what happens next time we want to do refined assessments like this, and we want to say more about how we can manage land. This is such a new area. You'll see lots of low and medium confidence elements. We might not have time to go into all the details, but there are lots of those. What kind of methods are needed for that? Many of you here will be familiar with the way in which climate models kind of started out as a model of the climate, and then just the climate, and then the ocean was coupled in, and then the land surface was coupled in, and then crops being grown in there as part of it. So the models become more and more complex. We now have Earth system models that can interact in some sense with kind of societal drivers. We have integrated assessment models. Is that kind of model-centric view the right way to solve this problem? You know, a right way, is it the only way? That's those kind of, how do we do this better, is one of the questions I also have in the back of my mind. The other thing, I would say even at the foreground of my mind kind of always at the moment, is the urgency and the way in which the urgency of the climate change issue seems to have kind of shifted in profile and during this year with the climate strikes and Extinction Rebellion. And I think it's kind of changed the background kind of environment, and I think it raises an interesting question of what's our window in which to make these decisions, this actionable information that we think the report is coming out with actionable information. How long have we got this high profile for? And this, I think the fact of the urgency is kind of, people feel it, if you like, in a more visceral sense since the climate strikes, Extinction Rebellion, whatever you might think about that. But one of the most poignant ones, I think, for me was this plaque that was put on the kind of first ex-glacier, if you like, whose full name probably isn't okay, but I don't think I'd do myself any favours if I tried to pronounce it. The first Icelandic glacier to lose its status as a glacier. In the next 200 years, all our glaciers are expected to follow the same path. This monument is to acknowledge that we know what is happening and what needs to be done. Only you know if we did it. August 2019. So this is a plaque on a rock of a former glacier. And this is something it's the kind of thing you feel, and it's the kind of thing we should feel, if you like. And that should kind of be there in our minds, I think, as we discuss events during the day. So that's all I wanted to say by way of introduction, and I think I'm just about running to time, which is good. So without further ado, I will introduce the first speakers. I apologise, the speakers have sent nice biographies. You've got these online. I'll say a few words. I won't necessarily read it all out. I include myself. I haven't done my own biography. I'll do that. I'll tell you about me later. That's fine. Our first speaker is Joe Howes, who's the research lead at Bristol University's Cabot Institute for the Environment and also director for the Masters in Climate Change in Science and Policy. She spent a year in government and in government office. She's an author of many IPCC reports, including this one. So I'm really looking forward to what Joe has to say.
Thanks, Andy, for the introduction, and thanks for having me here as well. So, yeah, my